Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to share with you an inside peek into one of my sketchbooks. It's actually an art journal that I use, and it doesn't have a particular technique that I use. It's just more of a journal where I can play. And that's a big part of being creative, is the ability to just let loose and try different things. You hope they work out, but you don't have expectations that they will. And the beauty of this journal is because I use acrylic paints on good quality paper. If I don't like the way something looks, I can just paint over it. The idea for me in this journal, and I like to set up certain rules for different journals, very loose rules at that, is that I'm using acrylic paint. It's easy to use, it dries quickly, and it comes in beautiful colors. I use craft acrylic paints. They're very inexpensive. They still come in beautiful colors, and they dry with a matte finish. I make sure I purchase the matte finish ones and not the glossy ones. And I do this because that way the pages don't stick together when they're completely dry. I like to use this technique where I try and open the pages so I have a 2-page layout, and I have part of the layout carry over into the next page. Sometimes I'll go for something symmetrical, other times I won't. But the idea is that I just start a pattern or even just a cluster of images and I carry it over, or I carry elements over from it. Now the layout is not perfect, it's far from perfect. It runs off the page, some of the images are wonky when they shouldn't be, but I enjoy it. And I can refer back to it if I want to create a more fine-tuned and refined design. Sometimes I'll take a look at what I've done and see something that sparks an interest. Or I'll look at it and say, I can do that better now. And so that's what I do. And that's why this is such a valuable tool for me. It's a springboard for getting better at my work. I'm going to take you through the pages, show you them, and then I'm going to show you my last page. Now, finishing the last page is a thrill because I love to finish my sketchbooks. I don't tend to do that very often though, but I do enjoy finishing an art journal. It makes me feel fulfilled. And then when I have it on my shelf, I just feel satisfied that that journal is filled. And it's one of the few that are. So let me show you inside that journal, and then we'll create that layout. Perhaps this is a technique that you might incorporate into your work. It might give you a peace of mind, or it might be a great art journal source for your own designs. So this is my no stress little mini journal. I keep a lot of journals. This one is just where I play. It's when I have free time. I can't wait to get to it. Sometimes I'll make sure that I reward myself by giving me a chance to play in the journal. And there's nothing wrong here. If I make a mistake, I'll paint over it. I'm not going to worry about it. My goal is to finish the journal, and I only have a page layout left, and so that's what I'm going to do with you. I just add different colors, shapes, and textures, and I try and keep the pages coordinated. Sometimes I'll carry over the page idea and just repeat it. Sometimes, like this, I'll use similar colors and something that just connects them. This is just one layout, different colors. And this is what I mean by playing. There's nothing here that's a masterpiece, but these are all ideas that I can refer back to and hopefully use to jumpstart making a masterpiece. Some are a lot of familiar shapes, some are just marks. Some are the back ends of a paintbrush that I dip in paint and then dip in my journal. And the reason I do this, aside from creating a pattern or mark making, is that it seems to unite the piece. Other than this, I'd have different shapes that kind of don't go together. But by combining a layer on top of them, particularly a transparent-ish layer, I get a really great result. Here these two pages are different, but you can see a lot of similarities. I was playing with that bright pink. Here I carried that shape over. Here I was just playing completely around. I wanted to create swirls. I liked the black and the white together. So I usually use acrylic paint. I might use acrylic paint pens. I might use a gel pen as well, but I pretty much stick with acrylic paint. I use the craft store acrylic, and I purposely buy the matte finish because this way the pages don't stick. If I used a different finish, I'd have to do something to the pages or leave a sheet of wax paper in between them so it doesn't stick. On some of the pages you can see I took some masking tape and set it down before I did my painting. And this was just to reinforce the pages. If I have some time and I want to work in my journal, but I don't want to work with wet media like the paint, then I'll just start taping the inside pages. And then I just cut around the edge, this just reinforces the spine. I like to peruse through this journal, and it does get beaten up, and that's okay. I've come to accept that and actually embrace that. I don't know how many pages there are in this journal, but it is a thrill for me to see that I've finished them. It's taken me about 6 months to a year. Can't remember exactly when I started, because the minute I finish it, I start another one. And I like working with this very small size. Each page is like 3.5 inches, somewhere between 9 and 10 centimeters square. And so it's a nice manageable size. I showed a short on how I completed this page. Now this journal has a feature that the last page kind of folds out. And so I painted on both sides of it. And I just did something abstract. I might use stencils, I might do it freehand. So I just want to paint these 2 pages. I usually don't paint my first page. I know some people might stick that page to the back here. I don't mind it being blank. Sometimes I like to tuck in little things into my journal, or I'll even make a paper pocket and tuck a little paper in there, like a tag that just tells about it. There's something I feel necessary to share. So from here, I'll just open my layout. I like to put wax paper in between each page that I'm working on, because I do get messy. And then I take just these clips and I clip down, and I might have to move it around to actually paint the page. I can even fold the wax paper in to make it a little neater. I'll just leave it open up here, but I'll fold it down up top. So to start with, when I don't really know what to do, I gather my supplies. So as I said, I'm using just this craft paint. You can buy it for just a couple dollars or less a container. And I like to choose 3 or 4 colors randomly off my shelf. And I'll choose 3 or 4 colors, and then if I don't like the way they look together, I'll put one back and grab another color. So there's no rhyme or reason. If you have a particular color palette you want to use, by all means, go and use that. So I just put my colors of paint out so that I have them at the ready. I might not use all of them, and I might go back and get more. But for the most part, this is a great start for me, and it helps me to see what I want to create. I think I want to do something with butterflies. So what I'll do is I'll start by just putting color down kind of randomly. So I'll just dip this credit card that I cut up and smear some paint. Now acrylic paint dries quickly, which is great because I want to be able to work on different layers. Sometimes I like that the paint is wet so I can blend it. But other times I like that it dries and then I can add different layers on top. Or I could let it dry and then paint over it if I decide I didn't like something. So I'll just spread out some paint. And I like using a credit card or something like this, gift card, because I can get a nice even layer of paint, fairly thin. You can see some of the texture of the page coming through. There's still a little bit of paint on there, and that's okay. I can mix it with some other colors. And I always like to cross over, at least partial. You can even cross over and paint the entire next page, but I like the center point to not be on the fold itself. I'll come over here, take a little bit more, and work some paint in there. And then when it dries, I can go in there, remove the clip, and just add a little more pigment. But for now, this is working just fine. Now lastly, I do like to take a little bit of a neutral color, in this case white, and just scrape a little bit of paint, whatever's left over on my tool. Trying to get rid of any straight lines that remain. I don't mind curved lines, but straight lines look very harsh to me. And particularly for the colors I chose here, I don't really want a lot of harshness. So now I want to start using my brush. I want to do the butterfly, and so I'm going to start with the center of the butterfly, the body. And so I'm just going to paint a little bit of the shape here, the little head and the body. And I have a smaller brush that I'll do for the antenna. And then I'll do another one over here, and I'll have him flying the opposite angle. So the head and the body. And it's just simple shapes. So I have a little circular head and then just a line for the body. Because I like working in odd numbers, I think I'll do one more here. I'll have them going mostly straight up. So I have the head and the body. Now because this is a small journal, I can use a small brush. This is a 4 round. I usually like using little flat brushes, but in this small space, the round brush really works well for me. I'm going to take my gray here and I'm going to make the butterfly wings. It might be a moth too, but it's going to have 2 sets of wings. One set's going to be larger than the other. And it's very whimsical, so I'm not really sure if it's a butterfly or a moth. And I like to do that first color. Put it down for both sets of wings. You can vary this, and these are all the different techniques that you do to make it unique and your own, even if you're doing a similar pattern or a similar technique. I want to come in here with a smaller set of wings. Maybe drag it out a little longer. And I want to let that dry. I do have a heat gun, I can help it dry, but for now I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to turn my page around so it's easier to work with. Clean off my brush. And now I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to go to that pink and I'm going to make some different wings going in a different way. So the other ones seem to go behind, these are going to go around. And right off the page, I think that's an important part of my work in this little book. It leaves me with possibilities, and then when I go to make something else based on one of these patterns, my imagination fills in the space from how this wing would finish. I'm going to switch to a different color. I'm not even going to clean my brush, and I'm going to see how I want to add that second set of wings. Just like that. Then lastly, I'll do a layer of these wings. Now having a limited color palette is very nice because you can coordinate your pieces quite easily and quite well. Eventually I'll use these colors over and over again on this layout, and it's just reassuring to not have so many colors that I feel like at the end that it doesn't match, it doesn't look right. I'm going to do this all in green here. I'm going to have this one come down, so I have another little variation. And I like that. So now I have 3 main characters, shall we say, for my work. I want to start incorporating something else. It can be a leaf, it can be a dot, it can be just a swervy line. I think that's what I'll do. So I'll take some of this green, mainly because it's already on my brush, add a little bit more to that wing to make it opaque. And then I'm just going to start creating long lines over here. Maybe one more. So now I have 2 areas of this green. I typically like to work in 3s, so I need to have green elsewhere. And I can have it on this side, in the center here. I think that's what I'll do. So I think I'm just going to echo that shape, maybe making a teardrop. And I'll just play around with that. So it's almost like a lone wing. So now I want to dry this layer before I start additional layers. Take out my heat gun and I'll dry it, but I'll speed it along. It's handy to have a tool to dry your work, especially if you're impatient like I am. So now that my butterflies are dry, I can start adding different layers and colors to them, which is exactly what I want to do. I'm going to switch to a much smaller brush. My other brush was a 4. This is a 2/0. And I like to just wet my brush so it's a little damp. I'm going to come in here first with some white. I want it to be on my brush nice and lightly, so I take it and swirl it around, and then I can add some shapes. I want to really outline this wing, this smaller wing. So I'll just take a little bit of pigment and just outline that wing. And I'll do that for both of them. And there I have that teardrop shape that I made here. So to that end, I'm going to start a teardrop shape over here, and it's going to just go off the page. And now I have kind of a white background here, and I have white here and white here. So I could continue adding more white, but for now, I'm going to leave it just as it is. Rinse my brush, and I'll start on something else. I want to take that peach color, maybe make some swirls here on the end of this wing. Maybe have that come all the way back. I'll do the same thing on this side. So that's a very interesting effect. Then I'll take that peach color. I think I'll fill in some of this wing. And I like how that's looking. And now I just have a feeling, so I want to run with it. Clean my brush, and I'm going to dab the end of it in that green. I'm just going to add some dots. And so I just play around like this, finishing the piece. And so I'm really happy with the way that butterfly looks. I want to pick up some of those dots, so I'll just continue using my brush and adding some of those green dots. This does change the dynamic of the 3 greens, but that's okay. I feel like I'm starting something here, so I'm just going to run with it, see where it goes. And that's the whole point of this journal, is that if I make a mistake, I'll paint over it or even leave it. So now I'm going to work on another butterfly. Flip it around, keep it this way, and I want to add. Now I want to add some gray to this one. So I'll take a peek and see. I'm going to add just dots here, creating that teardrop shape. And I'll do that on the larger wing as well. And then I want a little bit of gray on the bottom wing. I'll add a dot close to the body. And maybe a larger dot in the center. Maybe a little dot at the end. So now I've echoed that dot shape. I'm going to come in there with some white. Maybe make a little swirl here. So I didn't really know what shapes I was going to make when I started, but I just played and just let it happen. And now I'm just taking those shapes and echoing them throughout. So I'm looking at my butterflies and I'm looking at my empty space. I'm going to go back in with that gray and make some large dots, just like I have on that butterfly wing. So I create the shape and then I fill it in with pigment. Make a smaller one over here, and an even smaller one that goes across the page. So now to work on my final green butterfly, I'm going to take some white, and I'm just going to make a little shape, a teardrop shape in the center here. So again, I'm echoing that teardrop shape. I think I'll make some lines over here on this wing. And again, I'm doing that in the white. And now I want to flip my brush, and I'll start with that pink and just add a few little those dots in between some of those lines. And I think I'll do the same thing with this peach color. Again, just playing around with the amount and the size. And maybe over here and over here. So I'm really pleased with how this is coming along. I can flip my journal over. My paint is wet, so I want to be careful here. But I want to add a little antenna to each of these little butterflies, and I think I want to clean up the body on that one. So I'm going to add 2 little dots and then pull that in. Do that on all of them. 2 little dots. And here I'll clean up the body. And create my little antenna. So now looking at the page, I like the way it looks, but I do feel like it's very light, and I want to add some darkness to it. I really want to continue with the shapes I've already made. So I'm just going to take some dark colors, and I'll just stick with black, and I think I'll make a trail directing the eye across the page. I like to start with my trail fairly wide apart, so I have some direction. And now I'll just meet those dots together. I can make nice rounded shapes. All connecting the dots here. And I think I need a little here as well. Maybe just a few up here. So that's what I like to see on my piece. I look at it. If it looks too saturated with one color, I'll add additional colors to break it up. If it looks too light, I want to have a little contrast in there, so I'll add some darkness. The question is, how do you know you need to break it up? How do you know it's too dark or too light? That's completely subjective. So if you like your piece, you don't need to add anything to it. I happen to look at it and think it was a little kind of dull. It just kind of all faded into each other, and this black wakes it up. So now I just want to take my little clip off, and I'll take a little bit of that color that I wanted to finish up. And so that way I have the journal page that I like, my final page. So I'll let this dry completely. I like to let it dry like 2 or 3 days before I close the book. This way the paint has a chance to cure, and any water that remains in the pigments can evaporate or be absorbed into the page and then evaporate. So that's how I finish my art journal. It's really exciting to finish it, and really exciting to know that it's time to start another one. Do you keep an art journal like this where you just play around with techniques? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And don't forget to become a paid member of my channel. There's behind the scenes footage, additional techniques, and access to previous videos. Thanks for joining me today.